Hello and welcome to Stork'd, the podcast, in which we explore the many ways to build and define family. I'm excited to introduce you guys to Lauren today, and Lauren and I had just a really exquisite conversation, which you will hear. I got introduced to Lauren after this incredible news article about her husband who sold a substantial portion of this enormous and extremely valuable shoe collection in order to pay for their fertility treatments. And if that isn't an indication for just how expensive and complicated and painful emotionally, financially, and physically fertility treatments are, there's no better metaphor. As you will hear in this episode, Lauren experienced 8 miscarriages. I just want you to sit with that for a second. 8 moments of loss, of almost having your dream, 8 times to go through the grieving process. But one of those in particular, she'll share with you, was extremely medically dangerous. And this is one of those episodes that makes you stand up and pay attention, especially in light of the current political climate, where we're not paying attention to the implication for miscarriage on women. And don't forget, 1 in 6 women miscarry. God, this is an important listen. Lauren has a beautiful voice. I met her through the podcast and have stayed in contact. Want to be her best friend, and I hope you will too. If you enjoy this as much as I hope you will, please don't forget to sign up for the newsletter, share it with a friend. You never know who might be grieving and may want to or need to hear a story like this. And don't forget to give us a good review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. Here's Lauren. Lauren, welcome to Stork'd. We are so excited to have you. This is the podcast where we explore the many ways people build and define family. And you and I have recently gotten to chat a little bit about your experiences and your family building journey. I know it's going to be very helpful to many of our audience members. Would you mind starting by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm 35 years old. EJ and I have been married for almost 6 years. We're very involved in my nephew and niece's life. The nephew will be 3 next month. And then my nieces are 7 and 11. So that's really where we spend our time if we weren't working on trying to have a baby. Then we're both really, really active. So we like to, EJ's still working out all the time. Me, I have not worked out any during this pregnancy, but plan to afterwards. So that's really what we do. We're just really active. We like to spend time with our family and our friends in our free time.
That's great. So when you say you're active, what's your favorite way to be active?
Working out.
So are you a CrossFit girl? Are you a runner?
No, I'm not a CrossFit. I definitely not CrossFit. I like to do cardio. And then EJ played football in college. So he's always been into the lifting and just being really, really active. We like to be outdoors as much as we can when the weather allows it. So usually him and I both try to go to the gym if it's possible with our schedules. But I don't try to compete with EJ when he runs because I can be like in a full sprint and he's just jogging. So it really aggravates me.
Well, that's fair. I'm really not much of a runner myself. There's that saying, like, I only run when chased. And I think that's applicable. Yeah. Well, so you alluded to it, but you said that you're not working out so much right now. Can you tell us what's going on?
Well, I am 25 weeks and 3 days pregnant with a baby boy, no name yet. So during the first trimester, I was on bed rest because I had some spotting. And then my placenta was low. So then they put me on pelvic rest. So around 20 weeks, it was lifted because my placenta finally moved. But I have been so nauseous and so sick the past couple of weeks that once I got cleared, I still have not had any energy to do it.
Yeah.
So before I couldn't. And now that I can, I just don't physically feel like it.
Congratulations. It's really exciting. I am curious if you could tell us a quick overview about your journey or your path to get to this point.
Well, we started our journey in the winter of 2016. We got married in April 2016. So, of course, we wanted to have a family. We never knew it was going to take us this long to have a successful pregnancy. So then we had the first miscarriage, and we ended up having 8 miscarriages altogether. You've heard of miscarriages, but we didn't realize how common it was. None of our friends had miscarriages. All our friends had kids. So we found out end of November that we were pregnant. And then we found out the day before Christmas Eve that there was no heartbeat. And it was just after the first one, they're like, okay, it just happens. 1 in 4 women will have a miscarriage. Okay, it's more common than I thought. And then after I had the second miscarriage, I started opening up about it because the first one really isolated me. I felt really alone in it, because a lot of people don't talk about it. And then when I started opening up, I was telling people, hey, I had a miscarriage, and like, oh, well, my best friend had a miscarriage, now she has 2 kids, or my wife and I went through that, or I just had a miscarriage. And, you just realize how common it was. And that really kind of helped me get through it. And then we finally decided, hey, let's do IVF. We've really exempted and tried all our options. Before we close this chapter, we wanted to know we tried literally everything. So that's why we decided to do IVF. And that started the journey we never knew we were going to be on. Yeah. And then it's taken us since 2016 to finally have a successful pregnancy. And then now we are successfully pregnant with our little miracle baby.
That's incredible. 8 miscarriages in a short period of time. It's a lot. Tell us a little bit about your experiences with those and how you've navigated all the difficult emotions that come up with them.
It's been a lot. It's been very, very heavy because you're going through the miscarriages, but then I was going through surgeries on top of it, blood draws on top of it, infusions. So you're handling it physically and then trying to handle it emotionally. And then you and your partner are trying to work through it. It's a lot. It's truly a lot to carry. For me, it was like after the first miscarriage, you realized how common they were. So you didn't think it was going to happen again. So after the second one, we had a lot of complications with my second miscarriage, and it was really, really traumatic for me. And then it was like, okay, well, we found out I had a septum, so let's focus on that septum. Like after each miscarriage, I would just find the reason why I think was causing the miscarriage and would focus on that. Or I spent hours and hours and hours on the internet, which sometimes can be your best friend, sometimes can be your worst friend. And was like, okay, well, what about this? Could it be this? And I would take it back to my doctor. And at the time, that's not who my OB is now. I have an amazing, amazing OB and reproductive immunologist. My medical team now is absolutely the best I could ever ask for. But at the time, like, they're like, oh, it's not that. It's not that. And I kept saying, like, because when I found the septum, I was like, can you remove it? And my RE at the time was like, no, I'm not going to remove it. And then finally I found a doctor after my 4th miscarriage to remove it. And she was like, you should have called me after your second. And I felt validated. Like everything I was pushing for was happening. Like that should have been. Then I felt bad that I didn't do it after the second one. But every doctor I called was like, oh, let's just wait and see if you have a 3rd miscarriage. Let's just wait. That was the golden number, was 3 miscarriages. Don't know why, but that was it.
It seems appalling to me that somebody would have to go through 3 tragedies in their life before the medical community finally listens to them. And in a prior conversation, you told me specifically about this one doctor who just wasn't listening. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you get a doctor to pay attention to you when you're having physical and emotional pain around something and you're not being heard?
Now I would say go find a new doctor. But at the time, like that was me, the only RE in my area. So I was very limited to who I could go to or who I could go see. And then when you're calling on all these other doctors within a 3 to 4 hour radius, and they're saying, oh, hey, call us after your 3rd, like I felt so defeated. But now I would tell people, just if that doctor doesn't want to listen to you, do not waste another minute with them. Go find another doctor. And that's what I'm so blessed with my doctor. If I'm like, hey, this isn't right, or I feel like this is wrong, or I want to test this, my OB is completely so supportive. I've taken my OB a list numerous times. Was like, this is the blood work. Can we run this? And he'll go through like, you don't need this. You don't need that. We can do this. And that makes your process so much easier. If you're just feeling like you're just hitting the door over and over with your doctor, find another one. There's so many doctors out there that do want to help you. Don't waste any time. Don't waste 2 pregnancies, 2 miscarriages on a doctor who just will not listen to you.
So 2 miscarriages and 2 pregnancies. Though there was one in particular, the second one you said was pretty traumatic and pretty difficult. It was the thing that prompted you to start looking for another doctor. Are you comfortable sharing it with us?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So after I was with my old OB, and after the second miscarriage, I had to wait a week to have my DNC. After my HCG levels get a certain level, my body doesn't process the loss. And I begged them, please don't make me wait. I'm going on vacation next week. Like, at least let me kind of enjoy vacation. But we did the surgery the day before vacation. And when I was on vacation, I bled so much. Like usually when I'm at the beach, 7 a.m., I'm on the beach all day. I couldn't get out of bed. It was like 11 or noon, and I was still in the bed. And EJ's like, okay, this isn't her. EJ begged to take me to the hospital, begged me. And I was like, no, it's just worse. I'm just bleeding worse because it's just my second miscarriage. No. When I finally got home, I couldn't get off the couch. And I called my OB. She did do an ultrasound, and then they found out there was a blood clot, and then there was tissue left over. And at the time, I didn't know that the radiologist noted that I needed medical attention immediately. She's like, you'll pass it. And I was like, I'm telling you, something's not right. Like, I want to see you. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. You'll pass the next couple of days. So I finally called my oncologist gynecologist. 11 years ago, I had a mass on my left ovary. So he removed my mass in my ovary. So I called him, was like, this isn't your specialty, but can you please see me? And he's like, of course. He admitted me that night from his office for 13 days.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he is my angel. Like, I still see him every couple of months. Like, he has been such a true blessing to EJ and I. And he couldn't even go in there and remove the tissue until day 11 because I had to have so many antibiotics. I was on oral IV antibiotics. My potassium was critically low. I had to have like 4 or 5 bags of potassium. It was very, very traumatic. I can remember waking up from surgery because I had, I've known him for years, and he knew how important the family was to EJ and I. So he made the medical decision when he was trying to pull the tissue, it was growing into my uterus. I was losing so much blood that he was afraid if I pulled too much, he'd put a hole in my uterus, have to do emergency hysterectomy, or I'd bleed out on the table. So he made the decision to remove what he could of the tissue and leave the rest, and we could evaluate it from there. And I remember waking up, and the first thing I heard the nurse says, she has to stay prepped in case she has to go back for emergency surgery tonight because she's bleeding so much. And I will never forget that. I was like, wait a minute, is she talking about me? And then I realized I'm still completely prepped. And this time I've already had 2 DNCs. So I know what the process is after surgery. I know this isn't normal. It was awful.
You were telling us that even though a radiologist, another doctor, flagged that there was a problem, even though you were in significant amounts of pain and bleeding and were not yourself, you had a doctor that didn't listen to you. And as a result, you ended up in the hospital for, was 2 weeks?
13 days.
13
days. Almost 2 weeks. And at the time, I've never heard of trophoblastic disease or carcinoma. The trophoblastic disease, sometimes your pregnancy could actually be a trophoblastic pregnancy. But also if they leave tissue left over, it can turn into cancer. Trophoblastic disease is a form of cancer. I never knew that. So I had to be monitored all summer to make sure it didn't turn into cancer.
So, okay. So define trophoblastic disease. What does it mean? What is it?
All to my knowledge, I know is that even if you deliver a successful pregnancy, if they don't remove all the placenta, or if there's any type of tissue left over, successful pregnancy or miscarriage, it can somehow turn into a form of cancer. And usually they monitor that by your HCG levels. That's why I'm a huge advocate for women whenever they have a miscarriage to follow their HCG levels down. Because let's say, an example, your HCG level, mine was 70,000 when I went in. And that was almost 2 weeks after my DNC, which is extremely, extremely high. And that's when my oncologist no, this has to come out now. But say mine went down to 50,000. And anytime your HCG goes down then up like that, that's a sign of the trophoblastic disease or carcinoma. So that's very important to follow.
That is such good advice for anyone who unfortunately may experience a miscarriage, is to pay attention to these numbers, to the HGC numbers. So it's amazing. Sometimes I am just rendered speechless. And even though I've heard your story once before, I am still speechless at how the medical community, in particular this one doctor, failed you so much that you landed in the hospital, you had emergency surgery, you could have gotten cancer, and you were incredibly sick as a result of what could have been addressed a little bit earlier had this doctor listened to you. And then you were still told that you had to wait for another miscarriage before you could find the support and help you would need. Is that right?
Yes, because an gynecologist, that happened in June. I didn't even pass the rest of the tissue until that September. And he had to go back in, do another DNC and make sure there was no tissue at all left over. And he wasn't able to perform that type of surgery. It's out of his field, or he would have done it for me. So that's when I went to see an RE doctor. And that's when he's like, let's just wait and see if you have a third miscarriage. Add the third. Let's just wait and see if you have another one. Well, after the fourth one, you're not going to get another one on me. I'm leaving. I'm going traveling. I don't care. And that's when EJ and I decided it's definitely worth the drive to another doctor.
And you mentioned the word septum. You've mentioned that a couple of times. Mm-hmm. Tell us what a septum means.
So usually your uterus is kind of not a perfect circle, I guess, but similar to that. With the septum, it kind of is almost like a heart shape is the best way for me to describe it. And there's a bicornuate uterus. There's different types of uteruses that have different depths of a septum.
Okay. Okay. So thank you for defining that. It's like
No
we're
problem.
getting all this medical information by way of this very painful journey that you were on. And you are now, you're talking to us very like logically, like this happened, this happened, this happened, which I totally appreciate because it's now in the past. But in the moment, if you were to go back there, how are you navigating your emotions through a doctor that's not listening and multiple losses, multiple miscarriages? Was there some sort of self-care tactic or tool that you used to guide you through that process?
I was numb. That's the best way to say it. I was just numb, and I knew at that time I had to take care of myself. Like I needed to heal from that because before I could proceed, like I had to try again. I had to get rid of all the tissue, and that's when I really, really started spending a lot of time on the research into what's causing miscarriages, into septums, different types of uterus, and what kind of treatment is it, surgery that you have to do. That's when I really started diving into my own research. And I think that was how I healed in a way, because I was just taking all this negative energy I had and just trying to find something positive out of it.
And did you find the positive?
I did. I did. I learned for myself so much stuff on it. Like even when I went to Cleveland Clinic and that's where they removed my septum, like I was so much more educated on going in there. Now these are the questions I have. And that to me was rewarding in a way because I was more prepared to go in there and I wasn't just going there blindsided. So if I wanted her to look at X, Y, and Z, I knew to ask her, hey, you're going in here to do this. I want you to look at this, this, and this. So for me, it was really, really helpful.
And you mentioned that after miscarriage 4, you did a little reset. You and your husband, EJ, did a little reset. What did that mean? When you say you were ready to think through things again, were you reevaluating life choices? Were you reevaluating doctors? Were you reevaluating your path? Did you ever question, should I still be doing this?
We have questioned it, but it was more probably after the 6th miscarriage, we questioned like, okay, what are we doing? After having the traumatic one, after having the second traumatic miscarriage, after that, we knew we wanted to continue, but we just didn't know which foot to go forward with. So that was the big reset for us. Like, okay. And then we took a little bit of time because I had to, at that point in time, I felt my body had just gone through so much within that year because that was 3 miscarriages within a year. Like carrying that tissue for 5 months really threw off my body. Like, so I resetted emotionally, mentally, and then we came up with our plan. Okay, this is how we're going to proceed.
And were you guys on the same page with that plan? Like, did you, as a couple, have any debates or discussions about the different options in the plan? Or were you always, this is exactly what we're going to do? You knew as a couple together that that was going to be the way to go.
There definitely has been times on our journey that we were not on the same page. Because, from his side, he's on the sidelines. That's the best way to say it. No matter, he's been great. He's been my rock, but he's not the one physically going through it. He's there to support me and do whatever he can to help. But he's just like, okay, is she really good? Is she really all right to try? Like that was going through his head. Like, I know she's telling me she's okay, but is she really okay? So there was times I'm like, let's do this, this, and this, or let's try. And he's like, oh, wait a minute. Are you sure? And the big time when we both really had to come together was on IVF. Our big thing was, will IVF work for us? Because it doesn't decrease your chance of miscarriage. So you spend all this money because our insurance doesn't cover it. And there's a chance we're going to end up with another heartbreak. So that was a big decision for both of us. But there's definitely been times when we're not on the same page. It's never came to like an argument or anything like that. It's just more, he was more worried and more concerned about my health and my well-being, which is very thoughtful.
He sounds wonderful. He sounds like he's a really supportive partner. For those couples who are going through a similar long and painful journey, this is the one that you've been describing to us, do you have any recommendations on how to stay healthy in your relationship and how to continue to support one another?
Be honest, be open, have those hard conversations, especially like after the second miscarriage. I would say I didn't always open up to EJ. I didn't want him to feel bad or like it was his fault I was going through this. Like it's neither of our faults. That was a big thing. Like I'm blaming myself. And most couples there's probably one person in the relationship who's going to blame themselves. And there's a lot of guilt that comes with it. Even though I wasn't diagnosed with anything until after the 7th miscarriage, I always felt like it was my fault. And just to relay how you truly feel with your partner is very, very important. Because if not, trust me, those feelings, those emotions will come up one day. And it may be a heated argument when they come up. It may be because y'all can't decide on what to eat. And then now you're talking about how you lost, so many babies, or IVF failed, and you're wondering, where the heck did this conversation come from? It will come up at the most random place. So just go ahead and address it. Just let the elephant out of the room. You all love each other. You all will work through it. And really lean on each other through the hard times. That's my best advice to somebody.
I love that. I can totally relate to having a conversation around what to eat for dinner that spirals into something much bigger and totally different. Yeah.
It happens.
It does. It does. And, relationships are so fragile sometimes. And then you put this huge pressure cooker in, and navigating your relationship to what you want when you can't have it is tricky enough. But then you add your partner's desires and his hopes for having a family. And it just gets hard, I imagine.
It does. Because then, at some point in time, I was like, well, am I holding him back? Like, I know he wants to be a father and he's going to be an amazing father. Am I holding him back? And I've had that conversation with him before, as hard as that is. And he looked at me like I was absolutely insane, which is a good reaction from him, but I'm like, gee, I'll let you go your way if you want to go your way. I don't want a divorce, but if that's going to make you have a family, I'd rather see you be happy with the family than be here. And he's always said, I choose you. I chose you before we had a kid. I would choose you over and over. But there's relationships that don't last through the fertility journey. It's hard. It truly is hard, because I always feel like one partner is blaming themselves for something that's really out of their control.
Yeah. I had it easy. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have to deal with all that.
Yeah, you might have it just a little bit more easy, but you still had a really hard journey. Trust me, you still had a hard journey, especially to do it by yourself. That's hard.
I always joke about the partnership thing. And I do think that when you are going through something as difficult as this, prioritizing a relationship and making sure that it is healthy in the midst of all this is tricky. Yeah. So we've been bouncing around a little bit because there's so much to your story that is interesting and tugs at the heartstrings and is helpful for those of us who are listening and going through similar stuff. And I think I interrupted you. We sort of have gotten in the process to your 6th miscarriage. That many people at 6 would say, okay, that's it for me. What made you keep trucking? What made you decide to pull the trigger and move on to IVF?
That I just knew at the end of the day, our goal was to have a family. Like, that's both of our dreams. And I feel like sometimes your dreams take a whole lot longer to achieve. And this one has taken us a whole lot longer to achieve, a whole lot more heartbreaks than ever imagined. But it's all worth it, and especially my sister and I shared a due date with one of our pregnancies. That was extremely, extremely hard, very hard, because I was wondering, okay, how am I going to bond with my nephew? How is EJ going to bond, knowing like we should have a baby girl the same exact age as him, give or take it. Of course you're told the same due date doesn't mean you'll have the same due date, but it was really, really hard. And then after I got diagnosed with my NK cells and cytokines, after my high cytokines, after my 7th miscarriage, it took us 16 months to get pregnant. And we were like, all right, what's going on now? And then that's when we decided to do IVF the first time. And we didn't, because I had a positive test. Wow. So I was like, okay, this is our miracle baby. Like, I'm on medicine for my NK cells and cytokines. This is going to work. This is our miracle baby. And then that was our 8th miscarriage. And then after that, I was like, okay, we're not trying. Like, it was so, people don't understand, like, IVF, it's stressful. You're calling around these different pharmacies, especially if you're paying out of pocket. You're trying to figure out, even if you can save $10 on medication, you're taking it. Any way you can save money. It's so stressful. And then I went through all that stress getting prepared for it. And then I was pregnant, which was fantastic. And then we miscarried. And like, even when we did IVF, they're like, you can try a couple of days before when you do the trigger shot. I was like, heck no. Like, no, we are not in it this far to try again on our own. I want to try the embryo. Like, that is the plan.
My assumption is that because you've been on this incredible medical journey and you've gotten so comfortable with the jargon, that it's just like rapid fire coming out of you. But I'm going to slow us down and ask some definitional questions.
No problem.
So for those who are not familiar, what's a cytokine?
Okay. So everybody in there has natural, mine say NK cells, that means natural killer cells, and your cytokines. So they fight infections. Everybody has them. But for some reason, my body doesn't realize when I get pregnant that it's something good. It's thinking it's something bad, that it's an infection or it's a tumor or something and my body just goes in defense mode and attacks it, but it's something that's good. So they give me, I'm on prednisone and tacrolimus. Tacrolimus is a medication that they give transplant patients so their body doesn't reject the transplant. So pretty much when COVID hit, I got immunosuppressants. Great time during a pandemic to be on immunosuppressants. So that's when they put me on the prednisone and the tacrolimus.
Got it.
And then I do the IVIG, which is a plasma infusion. And there's like hundreds of people that donate their plasma and they pull the antibodies from it. And then they give me that. So I get good antibodies to try to boost my immune system to have a successful pregnancy. So there's a lot of immuno stuff going on right now.
Yeah. So that your body doesn't attack the baby, you're on immunosuppressants and then you're on this infusion that enables you to be healthy.
Yes.
Gosh, I mean, isn't it amazing that in the process of trying to create a family and in the process of dealing with coming up with the financial resources, as well as the emotions, the emotional roller coaster, that you then sort of almost have to become a scientist or a doctor. Like it's almost like going back to AP Bio or, some sort of advanced, I'm imagining like this huge textbook almost of all these terms and experiences. How does it feel to have to get like that well-versed in this field?
It is something I never wanted to learn. I have learned more about my uterus than I have ever cared to learn. And I tell my OB that all the time. Like, if he brings like a resident in, I was like, I feel like I'm more educated than the resident, just as a joke. I'm not, at all. But it's just so funny. Like, I can remember like at first, when I first started, and now like you would see all these different lingos, like you say, like, what does AF mean? What does RPL mean? I'm like, AF means ant flow. What does CD1 mean? I don't know what CD1 means. Cycle day 1. Like I can remember looking back and be like, what in the world does this mean? And then now, like you say, you just start blabbing it off because you just, you know it so well. But it's something I never wanted to learn. Never.
Yeah. Some of those lessons are not the ones that we want in life.
No.
I think I mentioned as the conversation started today, just before we hit record, I said, you might hear my crazy dog. And I have this incredible dog trainer who said to me, sometimes you get the dog you need and not the dog you want. And in this case, I think, unfortunately, it was the education you needed, not the education you wanted. Right.
Yeah. I mean, now that I know, it helped prepare me for this journey, and now I can go in and I'm like, this. And it's funny. It's not, but it is. Like if I have to go, to the ER because I was bleeding during one of my pregnancies or having a complication or getting potassium. And, like one of the first things I'm like, my D dimer is this level, my red blood count's this. And they're like, are you in the medical field? Are you a nurse? Like I've been asked so many times I'm a nurse. I'm like, no, I've just had 8 miscarriages. Like I just know more than I ever wanted to. I'm not in any medical field.
You seem to have found the humor in this as well.
You have to. You have to, or you won't get through it if you don't.
Yeah. Well, speaking of getting through it, you guys have a really interesting story about how you came to pay for some of your IVF. Yes. Do you want to share that with us?
Oh, absolutely. So right before we were initially going to do the IVF for pregnancy 8, EJ sold a little bit of his shoes and then had no idea still then, didn't know. And then we used that money for IVIG because my insurance at the time didn't cover it. So we had to pay $3,800 out of pocket for that. So we were like, okay, let's do this. Let's go all in. Because I didn't want to look back and be like, if we had the loss, and then be like, well, we should have done IVIG. That could have saved the pregnancy. So we went all in for pregnancy 8.
Tell us, these must be really special shoes. Like, how big is his collection? I can't even imagine having enough really cool shoes to sell to be able to pay for IVF. Like, tell me about the collection. Tell me about this.
So like in college, even before I knew him, he started collecting Jordans. And, back then, 14, 15 years ago, you could go sit in line for an hour to get a pair of Jordans. A lot of people would wear them at the time. EJ was like, no, I'm going to collect them. His dad was a big collector too into shoes. So he's always kind of grown up with like somebody in his family collecting shoes. So I can remember like one time I stayed like 6 hours outside. I was like, I'm not sitting out here ever again for a pair of shoes for 6 hours. Like there's nothing I want that bad to sit outside, and this was like when we were in college. And then he just always kind of collected them. And I'm like, what are you going to do with these shoes? Like, oh, that was my big thing. Why do you have these shoes? What are you going to do with them? They've been sitting here for years. And I never really realized the value in them. And that was just something he's always enjoyed, was to collecting them. And then, of course, it started getting harder because now everything is online. So you just can't go to a small town store and get them and wait in line for a couple hours. Now it's a little bit harder to get them. So he's been collecting them for like at least 15 to 16 years. So yeah, his collection is not nearly what it used to be after he sold all those. He got a lot of shoes together. And I was like, what is he doing? He'd sell a couple pair here or there, if I'm having surgery or another medical expense was coming up, but it was just a couple pairs, not a huge load like that. And him and my nephew like have the best bond. So I'm always like recording them. So EJ doesn't think nothing about it if I'm just recording. He's like, what are you doing now? So I just record him carrying him in shoes. I had no idea. And he's going through it. Him and Wes, that's the guy he talks to in Columbus, Ohio, and sells his shoes too. They're going through it, and then we leave. And I was like, what are you going to do with that money? Just question. I had no idea. Thought he was going to maybe say, I'm going to go buy more shoes and invest it, And he was like, this is money for IVF. And I was like, excuse me? He's like, yeah. He's like, you know what? You've been working overtime. I'm working overtime. I was in the room the other day and I looked at all the shoes. I was like, I've had these for years. And having a family is more important than any pair of shoes. Like, I almost started crying even thinking about him saying that. And, when he said that, I was like, everything that I've gone through, it's worth it. Every shot, every needle, he's just as invested. I've always known he's just as invested as I am. And then him just doing that was just, it just leaves me speechless. Yeah. And like, I go back now, look at the video, and when he's walking in, I'm talking to him about something, and he just turns around and he just smiles so big. Like, he knows what he's getting ready to do. And you just see this pure joy in his face. And like, to me, that's worth recording the video. Like, that was just, when I saw that after what happened, I was like, oh my gosh, like, he's so happy going in there. He's not resentful. He's not mad. He's not like having an attitude with me. He is so happy to do this for us and to have a family. And it's
God. So I can see you tearing up in this moment. And I can see you just being overcome with emotion at thinking about this person that you love contributing to this family of yours by selling something that was really important to him, which is amazing. And there's emotion, I imagine, tied up when you've held on to something for that long, when you've researched it, found the right thing, waited in line, so I'm not a shoe collector, but I imagine that when he's looking at these shoes, he's looking at his life's history, and then to take that and sell it for your future is a really powerful thing to do.
It is. And like you said, like, you have to research it. Like, okay, is this shoe going to sell or is it not going to sell? Like, it's similar to the stock market in a way, because it depends. Some of these shoes can go really for a high price very quick. Some of them you have to wait a year or two or a little bit longer. There's some pairs he's just like, okay, I know they're going to make more money in a couple of years. So like, he held on to them, and then it was a good time to sell them. Like, that's what I thought when he was bringing all these shoes. That I was like, man, shoe market must be really hot right now. Like, it's a good time to sell shoes. That's what I had no idea.
That's amazing. Okay. So we've talked about your incredible history, and then we've talked about EJ helping to pay for your future. And now you're pregnant. Yes. You're doing the IVIG treatments. Let's talk about the future for a minute. What are you most looking forward to in being a parent?
I'm looking forward to seeing EJ be a father. I can't wait. Like, I can't wait to see him hold the baby. I'm like, are you cut the umbilical cord? He's like, cut the umbilical cord. I'm just excited to see him just become that role. Because to me, like, he's always been like a extra father figure to my nieces and my nephews. Like, I'm just happy for us to have our own kid.
Wow. And so you must have held on to that image or something like it through all of this.
Yes. Yes. So I have a younger brother and older sister. My older sister is the one that has my nephew, and my younger brother is the one that has my nieces. And, I've always said my nieces and my nephews have been like our fuel to keep going, because I see how involved EJ is with them, how involved we are, and how caring. And he's just not that with them, like with all the kids. I'm like, he's an amazing person. I'm not just saying that because he's my husband. I would say that if we were divorced and 50 years down the road, he's just a great person, and he's just going to be an amazing dad. And I cannot wait. And I can't wait for him to get peed on either. I can't wait for that day either.
Oh, it's so funny. There's two things about baby boys I've learned in recent months. And one is it's not just that they pee on themselves, it's that they delight in it, right? Like they will pee in their face and their eyes and their nose and their mouth and then just like laugh hysterically. How do they learn that that's
Mhm.
funny?
Yep. It's a true boy right there.
It's a true boy. I was surprised. I thought that would be learned behavior, but apparently mine at least came out really liking pee.
Ready to go.
You're ready to go. Ready to go. Um, how has your definition of family changed as you've gone through this process, or has it changed?
It definitely has changed. At first we are like, oh, we want 2 kids, maybe 3, but definitely 2. And now we're just like, give us one. Like we will be so blessed and so grateful just to have one, and that has definitely changed. And we've talked about it like after this, like, do you want to try again? We have embryos. And both of us like, no, we don't want to go through the emotional stress of it, the physical stress. Like I said, we would be blessed and very thankful for one. We're getting our one. So that it has changed. If maybe 5 years ago we went through this and had IVF, and maybe a couple years later, but now we're just going to be grateful for the one blessing that we're getting.
I like the concept of being grateful for our blessings, not looking for the next thing, but really sitting in the moment and appreciating what we have, even if it's not what we expected it to look like.
Yep.
Yeah. If you were to define family in a word or two, what would that be?
When you asked me, it's like, I couldn't do it 1 or 2 words. And you were asking me, like, has family changed for me? Like, it has. Before you think, like, just your close friends and, of course, your immediate family. And after EJ's video went viral, like, I posted it so other people and other couples know, hey, this is what people have sacrificed. People sacrifice maxing out their credit cards, refinancing their house, taking out loans to have a baby. Like, it's not cheap. People are like, well, if you have to do all that, you can't afford a kid. I'm like, did you just spend $15,000 to $20,000 on a kid that you don't even know is going to be successful? Like, it's not a guarantee. And when the video went viral, that's the first time I feel like in many years through our journey, like the support was, I've always had a great support system, but it was different. It was like a little bit of a weight was lifted off my shoulders. And it's crazy. Like now I'm like, I have this huge family on social media that's praying for us day in and day out. They'll send us messages and check on us. How's EJ? How are you doing? How's the baby? So to me now, this family is just like my village. And it's people I've never met, but they're taking time out of their day to send me a message. They're taking time out of their day to pray for us. Like that's my family. So I can't describe it in 1 or 2 words. My village. That's the only way I could say it. It's my village.
You described it so beautifully. And I think it's really amazing how people do step up in support. Not always, but sometimes people just show up in ways that are astoundingly beautiful. And it sounds like that's what's happening for you right now.
It is. It's so touching to see how many amazing people are still out there and are just so, so supportive. And when I said that it means more to us than they'll ever know, I truly, truly mean that. Like we're so, so grateful for them.
I love that. And also, you help people too on social media through this podcast and in other mechanisms. You're out there educating others about infertility, fertility journeys, and miscarriages. How does that feel?
It feels good. It feels really good. Like I tell people, look, I may not comment back on every comment because sometimes that's just, I can't. I was like, if you send me a message, I will write you back. And that's something I'm like, I don't ever want somebody to feel how I felt. And if they're reaching out to me to write a message, it's because they're wanting answers or they're not wanting to feel alone. Like, I'm not going to have you write me a message and I'm not going to respond. And that's like the best thing is like when somebody's like, hey, I had my doctor test me for this. And finally we figured out what it is. So now we're going to go forward. And then you see like you were a little piece to their puzzle to have that successful pregnancy by taking 10 minutes out of your time.
Oh, that's wonderful. So if you are listening and you have questions or just want to learn more about Lauren's story and see where she is in her pregnancy, et cetera, how do we find you?
On Instagram, that's the best way to reach me is Miscarriage Journey, and I will write you back. I have a TikTok too. which is LB5353. But for some reason, the messages sometimes go through, or sometimes people can't send me messages on there. So that's always say, just go to Instagram, and I definitely will see it on Instagram.
Before I let you go, is there anything that we didn't touch on that you say, I really want to make sure we say this?
I think we touch on everything, but just don't give up. Like, I know it's hard and there's times that you just want to throw the towel in, but just keep going, because trust me, once you get that reward, it's worth everything. It's worth every shot, every pill, every penny. It's so worth it. So just keep going.
Fantastic. Well, Lauren, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And it makes me sad that you had to go through all of the ups and downs that you did, but I'm really thrilled for where you are now. And I'm just really thrilled that we got to have this conversation.
Thank you. I really, really appreciate you having us and for having me and letting me share our journey.
Thank you for listening to Stork'd with your host, Julia Carroll. This podcast is changing the conversation around the ways people define and create family. If you like what you hear, please support us by sharing with friends and following on Instagram at Stork'd_podcast. We also always appreciate it when you rate and review us wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. For more information, visit storkedpodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter. That's STORKD podcast.com.
Guys, many of you know that I have this amazing, perfect, delightful, joyful little munchkin whom I conceived using donor sperm. What I haven't maybe mentioned before is that the sperm came from California Cryobank, and that is a full-service sperm bank which specializes in frozen donor sperm, private semen analysis and cryopreservation, and directed donor services. I can tell you that I definitely took advantage of all that California Cryobank has to offer. I really appreciated that it had this huge and diverse selection of sperm donors, and it made the process a lot easier for me. They provide search filters and comprehensive donor profiles. Those profiles include things like genetic test summaries, medical histories, personal essays, childhood and adult photos, DNA ancestry reports, you name it, all the things you need to make a great decision, as I did, about how to pick your future donor. Stork'd is excited to share and extend a free Level 2 subscription to the California Cryobank Donor Catalog. By using the promo code STORK'd, STORKD, at cryobank.com, you can receive free access for 90 days to this donor catalog. Guys, that's an $145 value. Really awesome.